Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with Ansible in 2022. So the reason I made this video and the related repository, as detailed in the repository itself, is that in the last 2 years, between 2020 and 2022, or even starting 2019, Ansible changed a lot. And they have changed the number of commands, they've changed the structure of how Ansible works. And this is all a great change. But that also means that the playbooks that us network geeks made prior to 2019 or 2020 even need to be modified. And we need to change some of the way things that we were doing things to better fit the new model. And last couple of years has also been kind of like a transition period for Ansible where, you know, we, a lot of us network geeks were still using our old playbooks because this transition was happening, changes were happening slowly over time. But now, Ansible 2.9, which brought about a lot of these major changes, especially with the introduction of collections, has now come to like a stable point where we can just only use the new way moving forward. All of this is a great change because it will allow Ansible to be more scalable and be an even more awesome tool than it has been in the past. So this guide will hopefully, and this repository will help you kind of get started in the right way for network automation. Well, not even necessarily the right way, but at least give you the building blocks for network automation and building like the key files that you need to get started for on your network automation journey. So this few files with two different playbooks, which I'll review in this video, will allow you to back up your configuration and allow you to see ARP entries and endpoint entries from your iOS devices, NXOS devices, and Apex. In this video, I'm only going to show iOS devices, virtual iOS devices that I have running on GNS3. I don't have Apex hanging around in my own personal lab, so I can't show that. But the configuration for that is included in the playbook. A working configuration, I should say. So we'll get started. So if you're brand new to Ansible, you will need to build your machine, your systems to run Ansible. And basically you can only run Ansible on a Linux or Unix-based system. And one of the easiest options for most network geeks would be installing WSL2. WSL2 is Windows subsystem for Linux, and you just go to YouTube and search install WSL2 and just basically go with whichever first video comes up and then use the instructions to install it. And what that gives you is Linux running on your Windows machine, a virtual machine, in a virtual machine form. And the super nice thing about WSL2, this is a product by Microsoft, available for free. The super nice thing about this product is that it's tightly integrated with Windows. So here I have the virtual machine running already. This is and I can see the same files. I can see these files right from my Windows Explorer. So I can and then so then that integrates nicely with whatever text editor I may want to use. And so I can open these files directly from my favorite text editor, whatever it may be. So in my case, I'm using VS Code, which tends to be really popular. And on my Windows machine, I have opened and I'm editing the files that I'm using for this files that I'm using in this video right on my Windows host. And so these files are actually in the uh, Ansible directory on my Linux VM. So you don't have to do it this way. You could use your own Linux VM and get the files there somehow, whatever method you want to use. But this is a really nice integrated method, and it just really makes life easier. The next thing you want to do is install Python, and pip is really optional, but you want to install Python, and you want to install Ansible. And what happens, so what I did with WSL2, you can install several different flavors of Linux. And, just to make things easier, it's always a good idea to just go with a popular option, then you have more opportunity to troubleshoot and fix problems by Googling them. So I just used a Ubuntu image for my WSL2 install. And so now the downside is when you install Ansible by default on Ubuntu installs like a 2 or 3-year-old version. I have no idea why. So to install the latest version, you need to run these series of commands, which I've already done ahead of time. And I'll copy and paste these commands in the description of the video as well. And what this should do is also install Python. But just in case you run into issues or you get errors, you may need to install Python ahead of time. So what I'll do is, you just simply type in this command, put in your password, and then install Python. In my case, it's already installed, so I don't need to install it. And then, as I alluded to right at the beginning of the video, you need to, Ansible is now using collections. So this video is like a how-to video, and I'm not going to go over the details of how Ansible works. There's tons of other really, really great videos already on YouTube that you can take a look at that will show you the ins and outs of Ansible. So in this video, I'm just going to focus on, actually getting something done with Ansible. So, but you should, I highly encourage you to see some of the other videos on YouTube and other platforms like Udemy, CBT Nuggets, INE.com, and others to learn about Ansible in more detail. But basically, starting with some of the major changes made in the last couple of years with Ansible, they started using collections. What used to happen before the collections were introduced is whatever the automation code was needed by Ansible to run on to automate tasks for a large variety of different platforms: Linux, Unix, Windows, mainframe, network devices, all the different network devices. They were all included within Ansible by default. And so eventually they reached a point where including all of them in every single Ansible install got too much. So they introduced collections in which starting with certain version, I think 2.5 or 2.9, I forget which one, I think 2.9, you have to download the collection you want to use. So, if I don't need the mainframe collections, which I'll never touch as a network administrator, network engineer, then I would only download the network collections. So the playbooks that I'm using, you need this collection the Ansible.net common collection. So again, you can copy and paste this from the description of the video and install this as well. So then after that, what you want to do is download the playbooks. All right. So again, a lot of network geeks are not familiar with with GitHub. So there's a proper way to do it. You would create an account and clone my repository and then get it on your computer. GitHub actually tells you exactly how to do that. But just in case you don't want to do that, you can download this, right, and then put it in your Linux directory and then use the playbook from there. All right. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, let's first look at the topology that we're going to be working with, and then what are we going to do with Ansible. So the topology is very simple. I just have 2 routers and 2 switches. Seems to be frozen. I don't know why. Okay. All right. There you go. So I have 2 routers and 2 switches. They're all connected to a switch, which allows me to SSH to them. So it's a very simple topology. They're not doing anything fancy. But I just wanted to have 4 devices just for the sake of completion and show how things can be can be automated on 4 devices. So once you can do 4 devices, then you can do 40 devices or 400 devices. And so another thing you might want to look at quickly as well is in case you're using Super Putty and you have actually, let's come back to this. Yeah, let's come back to this. Okay. So we'll go to the network automation repository. And again, the link to this will be in the description, and you can get to these files from there. So after you have these files downloaded, and you have a physical or virtual lab running in which your computer can get IP access, SSH access to the systems you want to automate, then from that point you can utilize these playbooks. Okay, so in my case, I have these four switches, and I can log into them. Excuse me, via SSH. As you can see, I'm already logged into all 4 devices. So then the next step is actually running the playbook. So if you were able to successfully install WSL2, get the VM up and running, successfully install Ansible, then what you would want to do is log into your VM, right? And go to whichever directory you downloaded the files to. And in my case, I already have them here. And then run the playbook, right? So to run an Ansible playbook, you type in the command Ansible Playbook, and then the name of the playbook. And I have 2 different playbooks, backup and find all. I'll do the backup playbook first because that's one of the simpler one between the 2. Okay, so type in the name of the playbook, and then -I, which means inventory, and then you're passing it the inventory, and then you tell it where the inventory file is. And then in my case, you can name it whatever you want. I just named it all hosts. Okay, and then you press enter, and then the playbook will run. And this particular playbook, which I got from another existing GitHub repository. It creates a backup directory and then backs up the hosts that are in the inventory file, whatever the inventory file is. All right. So while this playbook is running, I will show you what the playbook looks like and what the inventory file looks like. So this is what the playbook looks like. And this part, it creates the directory. And then this part, it acts on these hosts, right? This is a variable. Those hosts are in the all host file right here, okay? And then using a network CLI connection, it logs into those devices and inputs the command show run. And then whatever the output is of that command is, it gets registered as a variable named config. Okay, so this config here is just a variable. I could have named it anything, config bugaboo, right? And then that particular variable, content of that variable are copied into this file, okay? And this uses some more variables, some built-in Ansible variables to create a directory with today's date and a subdirectory with the name of the host, the system that we're acting on, in this case, a router, and then the date variable again, and dash config.txt. Okay, so this is a nice nice introduction to Ansible, because you're doing some tasks that are kind of like not related to networking, where you're creating a directory and using some variables to gather date and time, and creating directories based on date and time, and then using those variables again to create directories and config files. So once that is created, we'll see if the playbook has run successfully. There you go. Once the variables have once the playbook has finished running, then we can see that the backup folder has been created, and we can see it here as well. And then the backup folder has the configuration from all 4 devices that is in our host file. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go over exactly how the playbook works in a lot of detail, but what you can do is following the steps already outlined, high-level steps already outlined in this video, you can put your systems, you can back up your systems using the script immediately, right? And so, that's one automated task that you can do right away, and then have them be saved in a new directory for each day, and so have a daily backup of all your devices. So now here's the all host file that has all the hosts that I want the script to act upon, and then these variables define how to access these hosts. All right, so this is a built-in variable in Ansible again, and so it tells Ansible how to access this host. So, Ansible was initially built for automating Linux servers, and so this would have been a different connection type. But then a lot of network engineers started using it for network automation as well. So then about 2.5 years ago, Ansible came out with a connection type for network specifically, network devices specifically. Um, and then in, and then you can also specify your type of network OS you're using. So this will work on many different platforms. And then specify your username and your password. And become yes or no means whether or not you're landing directly into privilege mode or no. So if you're not landing directly into privilege mode, then this would be no, and this would be yes. And then if you are landing directly into privilege mode, then this would be no. So this, you can change this depending on how your environment's set up. Now, in production, you would never, 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 never put in your password in your configuration file, right? Because that would be a big security risk. So the way you would do this in production is I'll run this script again, and I'll just comment out the password line. And what you would do instead is the exact same command, except you would add -k, right? And so what that would do is prompt you to enter your password for the devices. So I'll do that. Put in my password. And then the script will run without any file ever having your password stored. Obviously, this is a lab environment that I'm working on, so security is not important, on my own personal computer that this is running on. So, so just to make things easier for myself, I'll leave the password in here. But again, in production environment, you would never, ever, ever do this. Now, I also have a section for ACI here, and you can see it works in a very similar manner, and so if you have a ACI fabric in your environment, then you can define your APIX in here, and so the next big question is, how does this get translated into IP addresses? So that's where your host file comes in. So the host file on all Linux systems is in the etc/etc directory, and then is the host file. It has no extension. So in the host file, you would put the IP address of your device and the device name. So that's how Ansible knows from this host file that R1 is actually 192.168.0.211. Now, so this is another thing that I was coming to earlier, but I was like, okay, this is a little bit too early to get to that part. But in my environment, my larger team manages 1,400 devices. So we have a very large number of devices. And then inputting all of those entries manually into the host file is a big task. And and then, what my team uses is a tool called SuperPutty, which many of you may be familiar with. And in case you're not familiar with SuperPutty, most network administrators are familiar with Secure CRT. So SuperPutty is like Secure CRT, but a free, less featured version. But it's free, it's open source, so I created a little script that lets you convert your SuperPutty sessions file into an output that you can copy and paste into your host file. And so in case you're using SuperPutty and you have a large number of devices you want to automate, you can convert your SuperPutty file into a host entry and copy and paste entries into your host file. All right, so coming back to this particular repository, we'll go back to the script actually. We'll go back to the playbook, I mean. And so we can see that the playbook has run again after I provided the SSH password manually instead of giving it through the file, and it ran successfully. So this is one playbook that you can use immediately in your environment to back up, and obviously test it in your lab first and then use it in production. And obviously also do not ever save your production passwords in a file. But for lab purposes, it works. Okay, so there's another script here, and this can be used to find systems. This can be used as a generic building block for various different types of automation you want to do. But by default, what this will do is it will take an input called find and then find that for you. And that input could be a MAC address or an IP address or a part of an IP address. And so what this script does is, again, this is something that's really nice about Ansible and the YAML format that it uses. So this is a playbook. This finds ARP entries on iOS devices, but it can be easily modified for anything, iOS, NXOS, etc. So here's a commented out portion of the playbook that will do the same thing, but from on an ACI fabric. And then you can see the commands are a little bit different. So yeah, okay. So this is just part of, like, standard config, and we want to tell Ansible what host we want to work on. So all hosts are here, right? iOS hosts, right? And what the task is, you name a task, right? So that you remember what you're doing. Once you have like 20, 30 playbooks, you always remember exactly what this playbook is doing. And what this playbook is going to do is run some commands. Okay, and then which commands is it going to run? This is a built-in Ansible variable which acts on the next loop. And so this command will run these two commands, okay, in a loop across all the devices that are in the list of hosts. And then whatever the output of these commands are, in this case show version, and then pipe to include version so that we have a brief output, and then show IP ARP, and then pipe to include a variable called find. Find is not a built-in Ansible variable, so we'll pass this variable when we run the playbook. So it will input these commands, and then there will be some output from the devices, and then that output will get registered as a result variable. And so this is a variable that we created ourselves. And then that result would be displayed out as a debug message in the output after the playbook. Okay, so Ansible is really not really meant to view configuration or view status or anything like that, but in this case I'm kind of using it for that purpose. So we'll run this playbook. So same idea as before, Ansible Playbook. The name of the playbook is find all, and then we give it the inventory file, and in my case the name is all host. And so we're running this one against the same list of hosts that we backed up in the previous playbook. Okay, and then we want to give it -e. -e is like external variables, right? And then you may recall that we have this find variable here, right? And so we can use that. What we're doing here is we're telling Ansible to show IP ARP, including find, on all of these devices, right? And so in my case, it's 4 devices, but it could be 400 devices, right? So we're adding a little bit of additional programmability here, right? And so I want to tell it find equals, and then I want to give it some variable to search for in this command, right? And so I'm gonna ask it to find all ARP entries that have the numbers 192 in there. Okay. So now this playbook's gonna run. Hopefully I did input that command correctly. And sometimes things can be a little slow because I am working on a approximately 5-year-old laptop. Fun. Okay. No, so okay, so let's look at this error. No authentication method available. Okay. I forgot to give it the password. So let's go back to the all hosts file, and after I added and removed the hashtag from this command, commenting it out, I forgot to save it. See, you see this dot here that indicates that I haven't saved this. So now I will save it. I'll save this one too for good measure. So now this file is saved. So basically it didn't have the password. So this ended up being a fun troubleshooting exercise. Okay, so again, it says no authentication method available, right? So sometimes it can be really hard to troubleshoot things in Ansible, but sometimes in this case, like in this case, it ended up being easy. It told us, okay, something's wrong with authentication. All right, so I'll run the playbook again. And let's see what happens. Okay, great. Now green means it's able to log into those devices, and now it's running through that loop that we saw here. If you go back to the playbook, it's running through this loop. It's running these commands on all of these systems. Okay. And now it's showing us the output of those commands on all of those systems. So we can see, in my case, it's kind of boring. All of them have the same OS, right? This is just a virtual router, virtual Cisco router that I have running in GNS3. And then it's showing all the ARP entries that have the numbers 192 in there. So that's great. We found some ARP entries. Now another thing we could do is like search for specific MAC addresses, because it's searching for the whole ARP entry and then piping the output to include whatever variable we want to include, right? So what I'll do is let's pick on this guy, and so I want to find all MAC addresses ending in 7 Echo Frank 1. And what I'll do is I'll get rid of show version. So maybe because let's say I'm focused right now on just finding something, right? So I'll just comment out the version command. Okay, and I'll make sure to save it this time. Won't make that mistake again, and run this command. So then what we should do is we should get all the ARP entries that have the character 7 Echo Frank 1 in them. So again, depending on your devices and how fast your system is, my computer is just slowing down because it's a 5-year-old laptop, recording this presentation, running the Linux VM that I'm running Ansible on, and also running 4 virtual routers on top of that. So it's it's slowing down. It's slowing down. But in a real environment, normally wouldn't be this slow. Now, when you are doing, when you are running Ansible against APIC, uh, Apex can be slow. So this part will be slow because the Apex is slow. But for the most part, for uh, most iOS and NXOS devices, things wouldn't be too slow. Okay, so this is good. We're doing some troubleshooting. It didn't like something. All right. Okay. So because we only have one output, um, one input, then we will only have one output. But I'm trying to print multiple outputs. So I'll comment this out too, and I'll run this again. And so now this should run without errors. There you go. So now we can see all 4 routers have the same ARP entry. It just happens to be like that. They're all connected to the same LAN segment, so that's why they're all seeing the same ARP entry. And actually, that might be this computer itself. That would make sense. Ha! Okay, anyways. There you go. Yeah, so that's like this computer itself. So that's why all the 4 routers have SSH connectivity to this computer. So it makes sense why they have the ARP entry for this computer in their ARP tables. All right. So far we have backed up configuration, and we have seen the version running on all the different systems that we have. Again, that it could be 4 or 40 or 400. And so sky's the limit. And so next, we'll make some configuration changes. Okay, so now this is a very quick and dirty way of making configuration changes. Normally, you would use Ansible collections to do this in a more automated way. And so you would need to dive into the Ansible documentation on how to change a description on a iOS interface. So you could do it that way, which would be the preferable way, the right way, the more automated and more generic way. But if you want to do something quick and dirty, you can just give it the exact commands you want, right? So what we're going to do is I'm not expecting any output, so I've commented out all the output. So I just don't need to see any output, so I'll just comment the whole section out. And what I'm going to do is configure terminal, log into each of the 4 devices, and give it a description. And the description will say this is an automated description on, and then this is a built-in variable. So, and again, the more you use Ansible, you'll become familiar with built-in variables from other scripts, other Ansible playbooks that you run across on GitHub. So this is a very commonly used built-in variable, and so this variable is just basically whatever the list of hosts is in this defined list, and that list of hosts is defined here. So that will loop through these 4 names. And then before we do this, what I'll do is I'll log into the routers and show you that these interfaces don't currently have a description. So show run int e00. Yeah, so we can see all of these interfaces don't currently have a description in R1, R2, switch to 1, switch 2. And so we'll use Ansible to give all of these four interfaces a description. Okay. So I'll save this playbook, and then I'll run this playbook. And so now I've commented out this command, right? Show IP arp find. So now it's no longer expecting to see this find variable. Okay, so so I don't need to provide this variable. And so I press enter. And then now, normally what you would do is create a separate playbook for something like this. But again, this is a quick and dirty demo. What I really should have done is say, okay, change the description on interface E00 or whatever. But just, for lab purposes, this is good enough. It's changing the description. It tells you what it's changing the description to. And it tells you that it's completed successfully. That's awesome. Loss of green is good. Green is good. So now I can log into those devices and see if the description has indeed changed. And so show run int e00, and we can see on all four devices that automated description has been added. So this is just to give you a taste of what Ansible can do. You can use these files as a starting point of your Ansible journey. What I've seen in many other videos and examples in repositories is like, the host file is missing, or the config file is missing, or the other host file, it doesn't show how the entries are added. And then you're stuck trying to figure out, how is this working? How does everything fit together? But in between the 5 files that are in the repository, you should be able to replicate what I've done in your environment. Okay, so the host file, which you will copy and paste content into your own host file, because that's in the etc/host directory. And then these other 4 files, we went over the all host file in some detail. Basically, it's the list of all the hosts, right? And then we went over the backup and the find all playbooks in some detail. We didn't review this in any detail, but like, it's basically a few standard things that you need to do to make Ansible work for most network automation tasks. Okay, so I won't go into it in a lot of detail, but basically, if you do this, then you will be set for most network automation tasks. Now, one big thing, normally these variables are set to 30. By default, they are set to 30. Okay. In my case, I changed them to 300 because when you run playbooks against Apex, like this script does, it's all commented out because I don't have an APIC in my own personal lab. But when you run commands like show endpoint, again in APIC, the APIC can take like a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes sometimes to give you the output, right? And so because it can take so long, it goes past the 30-second timeout that is the Ansible standard. So I've just made it 5 minutes. So if you use this script against Apex, then you definitely want to keep this at 300 so that it doesn't time out waiting for Apex to respond to your request. And another thing is, you know, we have in all hosts here, we have network connection iOS, and so this will work for any of the, there's like 15 or 20 different network OSs that Ansible supports. Basically all of them, and even some obscure ones that are not officially supported, iOS will work for most of them because so many of them use iOS style command line. So for NXOS, you would just change this to NXOS. By the way, for Apex, uh, you can use NXOS because the APIC by default, starting with version 3.5 or 4.2 or something like that, it by default uses the NXOS style command line. Anyways, but you for Arista, Via, and others, you can substitute this for whatever type of OS you're using. And so for in my lab, I have iOS devices, so that's why this is iOS. So with that, I think I have covered everything I was hoping to cover. And thank you for watching. Hopefully you'll find this useful in getting started. And again, think of this as a starting point. And also keep in mind, this is like a quick and dirty way of changing configuration. And the real way is using the Ansible collections for which you want to, for your particular OS, you want to dive deep into the Ansible documentation. Thank you for watching.